process evaluation paper on pen-based digital media making on a project that we conducted in schools, high schools in California. And just to give you a little background, this is a NSF-funded project where we are looking at student mathematics learning through self-explanation, peer tutoring, and visual media. And this is for professional development of teachers and new skills and learning environments for students. And we are looking broadly at studying learner engagement, collaborative spaces, digital media repositories. And this has been going on for some time. And we conduct 2-week summer workshops at schools in multiple locations. And this has been going on for students and teachers for about 3 or 4 years. And what we do is we go into schools, take in tablets. Sometimes schools have their own devices, but we train the teachers and students there in software. Mainly we use Camtasia a lot, and we train the students to create educational media, videos, and they also sort of get together collaboratively making videos, and also critique each other's work in order to improve the videos that they're making. And we do all that, but at the same time, in the research and under research capacity, I gather a lot of data. So we interview participants, we interview teachers on their experiences. We get survey data. We have students and teachers complete self-reflections, and we gather all that data. And what happens is in understanding where we are going with these projects, we need to sort of evaluate where things were, how we understand, what we are discovering about digital media making. And so we wanted to understand the implementation, and we also wanted to understand learning, and we also wanted to understand where we are in relation to our goals that we set out. And so in evaluating this, we had a lot of data to process, and we used what we call system dynamics, which Moses is going to talk about.
I'm not used to this technology, so bear with me. Thanks, Hiroo. So, first when I was contacted, how does this guy work? Oh, see, I told you that technology is not my best sword. Is that good? Let's do it old school. So when I was contacted to conduct an evaluation of the project, first and foremost, I asked myself, what's learning? Is learning a linear process, or is learning a dynamic process? When a teacher is teaching, is it just an instruction, or are there other variables that need to be considered? And so I designed a logic model because I wanted to know what was the project, how was the project being run? What were the inputs, what were the activities, outputs, and the different outcomes that the project wanted to achieve. And in doing that, I got to understand that, hey, wait a minute, there is something that might be missing here. Because what we are simply doing is, we are looking at learning from a linear perspective, saying that if students are producing digital media, then there will be learning. It might be correct, but at the same time, maybe there is something else going on right there that we're not seeing. Well, let's take an example of this. So here we're simply saying that, hey, wait a minute, these are the independent variables that are affecting students' performance. So, as a person who loves my numbers, what I'll simply do is I'll run a regression. You know, teachers' perceptions of students' needs. You know, if I have a binary variables, you know, I'll just run a simple regression and look for the effect size. Then I'll report my results and say, hey, wait a minute. You know what? The teacher perceptions of students' learning really affects how students, you know, perform. And if I have a very good p-value, I'll report my significant levels and say, hey, this intervention works. However, what I'll be missing out would be, how does student performance affect the other factors? So we say, instead of looking at this problem or this issue from a linear perspective, how about we look at it from a feedback perspective? Because that's exactly how learning happens. Take an example. Take this for example. So here what we're simply saying is it's the same as the previous one with a little alterations. We're simply saying student performance is not only affected, but also affects other factors. We're also saying that, we bring in other variables that that are lacking in the first instance. So in this instance, we're saying maybe the teacher time allocation, you know, is affected by both students and teachers' perceptions. Now, the feedback perspective is what we refer to as system dynamics, whereby you are looking at the entire system. You're not looking at simple variables, how simple variables are interacting, but you're looking at how every variable interacts with other variables within the entire system. And in system dynamics, we use balancing and reinforcing loops, which I'll be talking about in the next slide or so. Then also, for this particular study, we used causal loop diagrams, which I'll also explain a little more as we go forward. And the reason as to why we chose system dynamics is because it has been successful in other fields while conducting a process evaluation. Now here is an example of a reinforcing and balancing loop. So for a reinforcing loop, it's simply a vicious cycle, saying that, you know, if students believe in their own capability, then they'll add in more efforts, and as a result, they will learn. Then we also have a balancing loop, whereby with a balancing loop, we are saying that the energy levels, if there are higher energy levels within the students, then they'll push in more efforts to learn. However, if the efforts are low, then they'll have less energy levels. So we're looking at when there is a positive and there is a negative, then we're seeing that the loop is balancing the system. Now the research question we posed was, how does the process of digital instructional material making enhance student learning? Because it's a process evaluation, and we're looking at the process of the students and teachers making the instructional materials. So the data was already collected. Hiroo and the team did an amazing job of collecting a huge corpus of data. But going through all the different datas, we then decided what might make the most sense in trying to help us understand the project, but at the same time be able to suggest meaningful ways on how the implementation could be improved. I'll be talking about that a little further. And for data analysis, we use system dynamics. And for this case, we use passive text data, which was pulled out of the self-reflections that the teachers and students had shared during the process. I've just been warned that I'm talking too much. I should move a little faster. Thank you. So what we did was, using passive data, we went through 4 different steps in analyzing the data. And I'll be going through every other step. I'll be going through every step as we go by. So the first step, borrowing from grounded theory, we did open coding, and in the first step, we're simply trying to discover the themes within the data in order to understand what the problem was, but also set the boundaries for the model that we'll be developing. So as we shift through the data that we had, we came up with the different texts. And then from the different texts, we then try to we come up with different codes and kept doing that. You don't want to know how many times, because it's a lot of data. But that was an exciting experience. Then the second step was to identify variables and their causal relationships. So from the first step, we had identified certain variables. Now, after understanding those variables, after picking out those different variables, we then started looking at what variable, which is the cause, which is the effect. How do the different variables relate to one another? We went to the third step, whereby we then started joining the different variables. So we're transforming the text into words and arrow diagrams. For example, digital instruction videos, leads to increase in identifying the learning needs, so the positive relationships. Now, the fourth step was generalizing the structure representation of the model, and this is just the summary of the crazy model that I'll be sharing with you guys. So for this, I need my paper so that I don't make any mistake. So the first model here was identifying the learning needs, whereby our results indicated that when teachers and students identify the learning needs, then the teachers are able, together they're able to come up with lessons that fit the needs of the students, rather than wasting a lot of time coming up with lessons otherwise. And then the second reinforcing loop was, through the development of the instructional media, the teachers were able to discover their own creativity and innovative ways on how they could teach, and that later on resulted to improving in the quality of the learning environment. Then the third model, we got to understand that the visualization, through making digital media, the teachers and students were able to easily visualize the lessons, and that helped the teachers to easily explain the concepts. And as a result, the students were able to understand the concepts within a quality learning environment. Now, very interestingly, I don't have this guy, but I'll just point. Now, from digital, so where you see the reinforcing loop 4, we're seeing that as the teachers and students were making instructional media, there was a delay, there was a gap. So this is a delay in proficiency in making the videos because they had to spend more time to understand the software, but also come up with quality ways on how they can edit, the content, and also the lesson studies that we're going through as we're critiquing the media. And then we are seeing that proficiency, as they wanted to be proficient, then the time that was spent to develop instructional media reduced because of what I just shared with you guys. And as the time reduced for them to make the media, we're also seeing that the teachers and students were less engaged in making the videos. So they're less engaged in the process of making the videos, but more engaged in learning how to make, learning how can they come up with quality videos. However, as their proficiency increases, the quality of the videos also increases. Now, I know some of us might be asking, what the heck does this mean? Oh, well, maybe it's me asking myself. Anyway, like you saw, we had so many reinforcing loops. Now, with the reinforcing loops, they can either be vicious or virtuous. Yeah, I struggled with that word. Yeah, I nailed it. All right, virtuous. But here we are seeing that within the model, it was virtuous. That the reinforcing loops were reinforcing good stuff. Then the balancing loops will constrain the outcome, but in this case, they help us to understand where do we need to come up with an intervention in order to better the experience. And in this case, we got to understand that time was a valuable resource for both the students and the teachers. So what does that mean? What does that mean for the project? What that means is that Hiroo and colleagues have to find ways on how teachers and students can spend more time outside the classroom and come up also with different incentives, how they can encourage teachers and students to work more outside the classroom in not only making the videos, but also coming up with quality ways to engage with one another. And like you saw, the process is dynamic. You spend a lot of time coming up with the models, and just, every step requires a lot of going back and forth. But in moving forward, my time is up, right? I have 1 minute. Oh, awesome, that's good. I can use that to summarize. So moving forward, it would be great for, instead of just using the data, for us to come up with group model building sessions, whereby we have the teachers and students present as we build the models. So that way, we're able to build more realistic models from the teachers and students rather than sifting through data. Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for a couple questions. Maybe the next speaker can set up. Any questions?
just comment a little on the pen and touch interface as part of the evaluation process? In other words, how do you relate the fact that the interfaces that you were exploring, or the experiences you were exploring with teachers and students, were built around pen and touch interfaces?
Thank you. So, like, thanks, Eric. Like Hiroo shared, the making of the videos, making of the instructional videos, the students and teachers use pen and touch technology, but also it's a dynamic process as they're making the videos, using pen and touch technology. So we need to take into account everything that happens within the environment, where the teachers and students are creating the instructional media. But also just to understand that it's a dynamic process. It's not something that just happens. Thank you. Did I answer your question? Thanks. Any other questions? All right, thank you.